Freshman football? You didn't play freshman football? Who was?
He showed up. Coach Hartsberger was.
Oh,
He
man.
showed up. But he was there a lot.
Okay. Do you know Coach Lovon?
Yeah, me and him are.
You ever have him in class? Anybody have him?
Oh, he's gone.
Okay, good. So let me tell you a story. Okay. Hey, you guys, do you know Coach Lovon?
Yes.
Picture him in your mind right now. Okay? He's got that dark hair. He's got the dark glasses, right? The black mustache. Now, where do you think he's from? I mean, we're talking about immigration here. And where do you think his grandfather's from?
Germany.
Italy.
No, Italy's a good guess. Germany, no. No. Where? Grandfather's from Russia. Okay? And he immigrated to the United States, not through Ellis Island, but through Baltimore. Okay? And his grandfather came in around this time period, in the early 20s. All right? His grandfather knew that people in America did not like the Russians because they were fearful that they were what? Communists. But in his case, like many of the Russians, they were fleeing communism. You follow me? So when he got off the boat in Baltimore, he knew that his last name, his Slavic accent, were going to make things difficult for him in this country. But he came anyway. When he got off the boat, he saw a dairy truck drive by. It said Law-Bon Dairy. You know how many Law-Bons there are in Russia? None. It's not a Russian name. He changed his name to make life easier for him in America. The Law-Bon. He moved out to Hayes, Kansas. Made a life for himself and his family. Okay? Eventually had a grandson named Michael Law-Bon. Guy who loves football. Yes? Coach Law-Bon loves football. Okay? I coached 1 year of football here. My first year I taught here. Now, you're a first year teacher and they ask you to do something, you're like, okay. I was also the Scholars Bowl coach that year. And we won city. And I have the medal. Right there.
You know I'm going to try out for baseball this year, Coach?
I did not know that.
DH, maybe.
Okay. Wichita City League Scholars Bowl, first place, 1999.
That's what he's trying to teach you.
Yeah, student taught 98 and started teaching 99.
Wow.
I student taught for Mr. Finkeldine. Did you guys ever have Mrs. Berry as a sub?
Yes.
Jan Berry? Student taught for
Mr.
her.
Finkeldine.
Finkeldine
That was
is
my mom's teacher.
the assistant superintendent, yes. Okay.
My... I just made a connection.
Okay, good. All right. Now, so that's a good immigration story, yes?
Yeah.
You guys, we got a lot of German folk in here. Yes? Now, have you ever been out to St. Mark's, out to the cemetery?
Yep.
You see all the names are out in Colwich at the cemetery. It's like walking through the Bishop Carroll hallways, the last names. Okay? But what's interesting is, and I talked about this with you, Ben, because when I first read your name, I'm like, because a lot of people change their names over the years. Okay, just to make life a little bit easier, change pronunciation, spelling, that sort of thing. Okay, you don't see that as often today, but certainly when there's a lot of xenophobia going on, that's when you would probably see people do that more often. You know what I mean? Okay. All right. So moving forward, guys, things are bad. We've got race riots. We've got union violence. We've got violence against immigrants. We're deporting people. Okay. And so what Mitchell Palmer did was arrest people and deport them without due process. Now, Congress is going to pass this law, which is on the last slide, the National Origins Act. Now, guys, this is 1924 immigration. Look at how this is for Russia, guys. Between 10 and 30,000 Russians came in that year. Okay. Norway and Sweden had a lot of people. Germany had over 50,000 coming from Germany. So they passed the National Origins Act, which is going to discriminate against Southern and Eastern Europeans. And look, this is what it looks like after that. So the numbers of Russian falls between 1 and 5,000. Okay, the number of Italians drops a lot. The number of Germans drops. The number of French drops. Okay, but who doesn't drop? The Anglo-Saxons, the British. Okay, so this is actually I took this picture, guys, at Ellis Island in New York. It's a big picture, and I took a picture of it. And I said I can put that in my notes, just like this one. This is from Ellis Island as well. Okay. If you look at this one, 249 Reds. What are Reds? Okay. Exile to Soviet Russia. Okay. And then here, Reds plotted countrywide something, arrests exceed 5,000. Okay. And a lot of these people are going to be deported as well. Okay. So that's your xenophobia. That's your Red Scare. Okay. And let's just go from bad, worse, right? Did we do this slide? Yeah, we talked about the Klan. You were sleeping.
We didn't get to the second one.
Yeah, we were talking all about the Klan. The one black person in here is sleeping. Now, your family, right? Your family is, when did your family come to the States?
I'm the first generation.
Okay. So you didn't have to deal with that? No. Thankfully. Okay. All right, but it's good to know about it. That's why we stay away. Okay. All right. Sacco and Van Zandt. Where do you think these guys are from? Bartolomeo Sacco and Niccolo Sacco, Bartolomeo Vanzetti. They're Italian. Yeah. Now, I have a confession to make. I was not always a good teacher. And you may think right now, you're right, he's awful. Okay. But that being said, I have improved, I think, as a teacher over the years. Okay, just based on learning more and more about the information that I teach. Okay. So when I first started teaching this, did I tell you this yesterday? I was one day ahead of my students. I tell you that? Guys, one of the hardest jobs you could ever have is being a first-year teacher. Okay, so I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning. This is the textbook we had when I started teaching. I saved it. Okay, it's actually a decent book. But I would take this home and I do outline notes of the chapter and then print it, come to school, print it, and put it on one of those clear ones, like an overhead sheet. You know what I'm talking about? And then I would put it up on the overhead.
Yeah.
Okay? And then I go home, feed my kids, get some sleep, get up at 4 o'clock the next day, and do the notes and then teach them to my kids. So I was literally 4 hours ahead of my students. That's how I taught the first year. Okay? So I don't remember learning about Sacco and Vanzetti in high school. I don't remember learning about it in college. I'm going with what the book says. All right, so I take this and I start typing up notes about Sacco and Vanzetti. I'm like, oh man, that's awful. Okay, so if you guys will indulge me, can I read a couple paragraphs from this old textbook to you?
Sure.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Now, I want your opinion about what you think about this when I'm done. Every epic in American history has its martyrs. You guys are Catholic, you know what martyrs are, right? Their names enter the folklore. John Brown was a willing martyr in the fight against slavery. Remember crazy John Brown? Leaving Kansas, all that? In this later age, Niccolo Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, two Italian-born immigrants, became unwilling martyrs in the fight, the struggle for equal justice for all. In 1920, a holdup took place at a Boston, Massachusetts shoe factory. A paymaster and a guard were killed. So this is a robbery murder. Shortly afterwards, Sacco and Vanzetti were arrested. They were both gentlemen with no criminal record, but they believed in the philosophy of anarchy. They were tried, found guilty, and sentenced to die. There was no solid evidence against them. It was widely thought that they were really victims of a frenzied fear of radicals and aliens. And in this case, when we say aliens, we're talking about immigrants. That's the term we used to use. Illegal aliens. Now we say immigrants. Now we say undocumented people and stuff like that. Okay. The belief in the innocence of Sacco and Vanzetti was so widespread that in 1927, the governor appointed a committee to review the fairness of the trial. But the committee itself was loaded with prejudice. The author of the report was Harvard President Lawrence Lowell, long an officer of the Immigration Restriction League that put those new laws on immigration on, as well as his belief in the superiority of the Anglo-Saxon people. It's not surprising that the committee reported that the trial had been fair. When Sacco and Vanzetti were executed, millions of Americans mourned. They believed that the two gentle Italian immigrants were victims of fear and prejudice. They were victims of xenophobia and the Red Scare. And people got so worked up about it that these two guys were falsely arrested, falsely convicted, and falsely executed. That's how bad it got in this country in the 1920s. Now, does this book make it sound like these two guys were, two innocent people were executed for a crime they didn't commit? It sure does. And that's what I taught my students, Lily. For the first 3 years I taught. So this is horrible what happened to these guys. Yeah, I know they believed in anarchy, but they were gentle Italian. All right, so a few years later, I'm reading a book called The History of the American People by Paul Johnson. All right, long story short, there was a book written about this case called Boston, 2 volumes, okay, 2 volumes. The author of the book was Upton Sinclair. He's a famous American author. He wrote a book called The Jungle, which is about the meatpacking industry in the United States. And The Jungle sold millions of copies. In fact, it became required reading. I read it in high school. It's like 1984 that you didn't read that you should have. We had to read The Jungle, okay? And the meatpacking industry, they talked about how, when they're cutting the meat and stuff like that, people would cut off their finger and it would fall into the vat of meat and just be chewed up with the other hamburger. And then there were rats. It was unsanitary, and rat feces, rat poop in your food and your meat and stuff like that. He wrote this book called The Jungle, and it sold millions of copies. Okay, so this same author, Upton Sinclair, wrote a 2-volume novel called Boston about these guys. And he was interviewed a few years after publishing the book. And the interview asked him, so what did you think about the case? The book said they were innocent, but did you really feel they were innocent? And Upton Sinclair admitted, he said, after all the research we did for this book, we were left with no doubt that these 2 guys had committed the murders. And then a few years later, I'm reading a magazine article. And there's an article about this estate sale in California. You guys know what an estate sale is? When somebody dies and they just kind of sell off their stuff. Well, at this estate sale was one of the lawyers, it was the lawyer's estate for one of these guys. And in that estate, they found letters. Because, the lawyer is confidentiality with the client, describing how these 2 carried out the robbery and the murders. These guys were guilty. Now, for the first 3 years that I taught, I did not teach my students the truth. This became a cause célèbre. Guys, there were protests all over the United States. There were protests in freaking Japan about this. Okay? Remember our immigration policy with Japan? With Asia? No Asians. Remember that? Okay, so people over there are like, yeah, these Americans, they're xenophobic. I want to talk about xenophobic. The Japanese are xenophobic. Do they want a bunch of people moving into their country? No. Right? Because we have the most lax immigration laws in the world. You understand that, right? Try immigrating to Mexico illegally. See how that works out for you. Want to be in a Mexican jail? No, you don't. But that's where you're going to wind up. Okay? Now, so what's my point? Why am I telling you this story? Don't believe everything I say. Don't believe everything you read. Don't believe what you hear on the news. You guys know that trust in our media today is at its lowest point in American history. And there's a reason for that. Because they're not doing their job correctly. A journalist tells what's going on. The journalists are not supposed to give their opinion. That's exactly what happens in all of our news today. All of it. Whether it's from the conservative Republican side or the liberal Democratic side. Fox News is biased towards Republicans. Pretty much everybody else is biased towards the Democrats. So where do you get your news? How do you know the truth? Now, this is what I do, guys. I watch both. Actually, I don't watch it. I just read the news now. Okay? And with social media, guys, for all its faults, okay, you can follow people like on Twitter that are actually at these events taking place live. You know what I mean? Like, so you can get real news on the ground instantly. Okay, I follow like, I follow like 5,000 different people on Twitter. Okay, somebody that's interesting or a news organization that's interesting, you know, and I like, you know, the stuff they post about is interesting. So I like it and it shows up on my feed. Okay. Yeah, so that's just my point, guys. Now, you've all, I don't, it's been a few years, but you guys don't remember the Michael Brown case in St. Louis, Missouri, hands up, don't shoot. Okay. Now, you've all heard of George Floyd, right? Everybody knows who George Floyd is, right? Okay. So what we saw with the video of the cop on George Floyd's neck was awful. I mean, you watched that for like 8 minutes or however long it was. Okay. Did the cop have to do that? No. Was there another way to restrain that guy? Yes. Okay. Was he hopped up on fentanyl? Yes. Okay. Now, that doesn't give the right for a cop to harm somebody. Okay. Did George Floyd die while he was laying on the ground under the cop's knee? No. He did not die there. He was taken into custody and died like 30 minutes later. Okay, so it wasn't like he cut off the circulation and he died. Okay. Now, the cop was found guilty of murder. Okay. In the Michael Brown case, which was a situation where Michael Brown just robbed a convenience store, was walking down the middle of the street. The cop pulled up, said, get out of the middle of the street. Michael Brown attacks the cop, punches him, goes for his gun. The cop, Officer Wilson, pulls out his gun. He shoots Michael Brown. There were riots. St. Louis. Okay. This became a national story. All right. And there was one witness that said Michael Brown put up his hands and said, don't shoot. put his hands up, don't shoot. You guys heard that? Hands up, don't shoot? Okay, now, the cop was investigated for the shooting. And so they did a grand jury. This is what happens. You have a grand jury. You've got 24 people in a room. The prosecutor, the district attorney, will bring witnesses before the grand jury to describe what they saw. Okay? Now, they were in a mostly black neighborhood. So almost all the witnesses were black. Michael Brown was black. Okay? And the district attorney asked those witnesses what they saw. Okay? And none of them said, Michael Brown put his hands up and said, don't shoot. None of them said that. That was one of his friends that said that. The media took that, ran with it, and next thing you know, celebrities and NBA players are wearing shirts that say, hands up, don't shoot. It's a lie. It didn't happen. And the cop was not charged. Okay? Now, will that cop ever work again? And no, he'll never work again. Okay? Now, it was a justifiable shooting according to the grand jury. Okay? What the cop did to George Floyd was not seen as justifiable. Okay? In fact, they called it murder, second-degree murder. Okay? But these are the cases we hear about where the media jumps on it and just goes and goes and goes. You know what I mean? It's all about ratings. Okay? Because there's lots of different examples that you could have used for police brutality. Okay? But the one with Michael Brown, that was not a good one because it was a justified shooting. Okay? This is not a good case to use for xenophobic behavior on the part of the United States. Because this is bull. This is bull. Okay? It's just something learning about our surroundings and being a skeptic. Be a skeptic. Don't trust everything you hear. You with me? Okay? All right. Let's talk about something a little more spirited. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, let's get off this Red Scare and all this, right? Let's talk about bathtub gin, booze, hooch, the devil's juice, prohibition. Hey guys, this is one of the dumbest things we ever did as a country. And it took us 13 years, 14 years to figure it out, actually, that it was done. 1919 to 1933. It was illegal to manufacture, transport, sell, or consume alcoholic beverages. Now, there were some loopholes. Like, you can get a prescription for alcohol. Kind of like in Oklahoma, you can get a prescription for marijuana. Right? Are there health benefits to alcohol? You heard of red wine? Heart disease? Right? I mean, there's people in France and Italy, they don't get heart disease like we do. What's the #1 killer in America? Heart disease. Obesity leads to that. But also our diet, right? What we eat leads to heart disease. Smoking leads to heart disease. A lot of things lead to heart disease, and we're good at it in this country. We're really good at it. It's the #1 killer in America. What's #2? Cancer. #3, auto accidents. We're good at that too. We drive more than most countries. Okay. We'll talk about driving in a little bit. Now, some states, like Kansas, had prohibition before the 18th Amendment was even passed, ratified. Okay? You guys remember some Kansas history? That lady with the hatchet? What was her name? Carrie Nation. So guys, downtown Wichita, there's the Eaton Hotel. Okay? And long time ago, back in the 19 teens, there used to be a saloon on the first floor of the Eden Hotel. And she went in there with that hatchet and just tore it to pieces. Okay. Little old woman. Okay. With a hatchet. The devil's juice, man. Okay. And we need to get rid of it. So who do we have to blame for this really bad idea? You heard of the women's temperance movement? That was the one that got it going. The women's temperance movement.
Yeah, and they blamed the men.
Oh, because the men behave badly. They get drunk and they beat their wives and their children, yes? And they lose all their money gambling and drink all their money down the drain. Yes? Yeah. Because that's what men were doing. And who's in Congress? Are there any women in Congress at this point? Okay, so it takes 2/3 of Congress to propose this amendment and 3/4 of state legislatures to ratify it, which are full of men. So the men were listening to their wives when they did this. You're going to blame women on this. Yeah, not really. Now, yeah, I mean, this is, it's insane. Look, even if you live in kind of a pious family that doesn't drink, okay? Now, I am aware you guys are Catholic, so I know what goes on. You know what it means.
No, oh my gosh.
Hey,
Literally a
Yeah,
reputation
I
of
saw a
Catholics.
picture of you, like, with your mom.
I showed you that picture.
I know.
I wasn't even drinking in that picture. That was Ethan.
Oh,
Yeah, okay.
It was
and your
his-
mother.
She wasn't drinking either.
Okay. Whatever. Now, listen. Even if you, like, your family doesn't drink, do you think most Americans saw an issue with somebody having a glass of wine with, say, Thanksgiving dinner? No. I mean, you're taking something that really more than half the population does on a regular basis, and you're making it illegal. There's going to be no respect for the law. Do you think there were any cops that drank during Prohibition? Of course. What about politicians? You know, the ones that make the law. Of course they were. Okay, it's like Nancy Pelosi saying, put on a mask. Then you see her in a picture, in a video, like the next day, out with a bunch of people not wearing a mask. Rules for thee, but not me. Hypocrites. Hypocrites. All right. So, we got to give some good reasons if we're going to do this, since most of the people like to drink. So it's a war. The war's on. So we need to conserve grain so we have food for our soldiers. And who are we at war with? Yeah, Germany. Let's stick it to the German beer brewers. They won't be able to sell beer here. And some of the German immigrants that moved to places like Milwaukee, Wisconsin, St. Louis, Missouri, and brewed beer. You know, Anheuser-Busch, and Miller, yeah. And we need sober and clear-headed soldiers and workers during the war, right? So these are the reasons we get, okay? Now, you can, like I said, you get a prescription, and there was an exception for mass. Priests could have wine, real wine, okay, for mass. This isn't going to work too well, okay? So what you do is you created a whole new class of criminal. You know what I mean? You're creating a bunch of criminals, people that want to drink. Now, can you make it on your own? You guys know somebody in your family or friends, somebody that's tried to brew beer before? You know, make their own?
No.
Never know? No.
Oh wait, yeah, limoncello.
Yeah. What? Jello?
Limoncello.
Limoncello? What the hell is
That's
that?
like my fancy grandparents' died. I mean, limoncello.
Okay. Here's an interesting number for you. Okay, if you were to walk all the way around the border of the United States You know how many miles that would be? Huh? Well, it's roughly 18,000 miles.
That's it.
18,000 miles. Now, how are you gonna stop? Because Mexico and Canada weren't stupid, and they did not prohibit alcohol. So how are you gonna stop it from coming in across our borders? How are you gonna stop it from coming in on our ships? They hired 1,500 and what, 28 federal agents to enforce this. Now, the local cops, they'll try and enforce it. But a lot of those people drank too. You know what I mean? It's like, this is silly. I mean, how many of you guys know a cop? Do they drink? Yeah. It's a way to escape from freaking a really tough job. And a lot of cops have a problem with drinking. It's a thing. You know what I mean? It's a thing. I'm not throwing aspersions on anybody, okay? So you create a bunch of new lawbreakers. People don't respect the law. It's like speed limits.
Yeah, they're.
It's, what is it, a suggestion? On Kellogg, right? Or 235, K96. It's a suggestion for me. You got any Leadfoots in here?
Junior. He's gotten pulled over like 5 times.
How many tickets you got?
Like 2.
2 out of 5?
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
I know.
I've gotten out of more tickets than I've gotten.
How do you get out of tickets?
You want to know?
Yeah.
Let me give you some advice. Okay? And Junior, let me just say this, and I'm not picking on you. Okay? You know what racial profiling is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you feel like the cards are stacked against you with the police?
No.
Have you been treated well?
Okay, there was this one time that really pissed me off. I'm not even gonna lie.
Okay.
Can I rant to you real quick about it?
Yeah, tell me.
Okay, so it was my freshman year, and that's when I drove a truck.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was going past this light, and it was yellow, and then like I cross it, and then it's red, but my tailgate is down. And then the motorcycle cop pulls me over, and he's like, "You know why you were pulled over?" And I was like, "No." And he was like, "Your tailgate was still in the intersection when you drove past." And I was like, "What?" And then I was like, "You're being for real?" And he's like, "No, I'm not joking with the law." And he was just being a total douche about it. And I was like, "Wow, okay." And so then he was like, "I'm gonna just let you off with a warning." And then I find out he gives me a ticket. I'm so out. Like, man, that really pissed me off.
I agree. That makes me mad too.
That's illegal.
Yeah.
That isn't even illegal.
Yeah, I mean, you could challenge that.
Yeah, in the intersection.
Right.
Technically you pass.
Right.
Man, I don't know how to challenge that. It's just like, okay.
Well, you go to court. So instead of paying your ticket, you go to court. And you tell the judge that. And if the cop doesn't show up for that,
Yeah.
you're off.
I hear the cops barely show up to ask the cases anyway.
That is sometimes the case because they got other stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you say, you call and say, I want to contest this ticket,
Yeah.
and they'll give you a court date.
Oh.
I've never done that.
Yeah.
Because I usually get out of my tickets.
How do you do it?
Ow.
Okay. All right. So listen. The cop you dealt with, what you called him a name, but I don't want that job.
Yeah.
You want to pull a complete stranger over at night, not knowing who this person is, and walk up to a stranger's car like that, not knowing what they have in their hands and that sort of thing. I don't want that job. So, guys, for cops, pulling people over can be scary. Okay, so I try and put the cop at ease. Okay, make them feel safe. Now, most of the time when I get pulled over, I'm on the highway. Okay, but if you get pulled over on Central, don't stop on Central. Put your turn signal on to the right, okay, and pull over in the next parking lot or side street. Because if you stop on Central, first of all, you're going to be backing up traffic. And then the cop is going to have cars driving right by him as he's at your window. Follow me? So get off the road. Now, if you're on the highway, get your 2 right side tires off there's a shoulder usually on the highway. Get them in the grass. So like, give the cop a lot of room. You ever been on the side of the road when a semi comes by at 70?
Wow.
It's a little bit scary. You know, it's loud, it's scary, the wind whips up. So get off the side of the road. Okay? Turn your car off. Roll down your window. And before the cop comes up to your vehicle, have your license and insurance card out. That's what they're going to want to see. Have those out, both hands on the steering wheel. So what you've done at this point is you made the cop safe by pulling far enough over, and he can walk up to your window and see both of your hands. He knows you don't have a weapon. He knows you don't have a gun. The car is off, so he knows you're not going to throw it in the drive and take off. So now you put the cop at ease, right? Now, be courteous. Good evening, officer. Not good evening, officer. Good evening, officer. Okay? Well, that's what somebody, when they're slurring. Okay? And then he's going to say what you said. Do you know why I pulled you over? Okay? And you're going to know. Like, I was speeding. No, I was speeding. I'm not going to say that, though. And this is where the acting comes in. Oh, was I speeding? Oh, shoot, I'm sorry. And then got a good excuse? I just dropped my son off at basketball practice. I was running home to get my daughter. I'm sorry, sir, I wasn't paying attention. At that point, you're either getting a ticket or you're not. You've done everything you can. Okay? And guys, that excuse I just gave you got me out of 3 violations for 1 stop. Speeding. I was turning to go up a on-ramp on K96. Didn't stop. It was a red light. There was nobody around. And so I just kind of rolled through the red light and I didn't use my turn signal.
But we don't have kids.
Okay, you got a good excuse?
You can't make a video.
Sir, I was just running to the grocery for my mom. I had to get back. Sorry, making dinner. I'm sorry I wasn't paying attention.
Say you're picking up your little cousin.
Whatever. Whatever you can sell. But be apologetic. Now, if he says, sorry, you're going to get a ticket, then you can be rude if you want. I mean, I'm not going to be rude, but I know what's going through my mind at that point. Right? Dude, I freaking paid your salary. I paid taxes for this road, and I'm on this road more than you are, and you're giving me a freaking ticket. Now, I'd like to say that to him, but I have gotten out of a lot of tickets that way. And I have had students that I've told this to that will friend me on Facebook after you graduate, say, Mr. Ebright, just got out of a ticket. Thank you. Okay. Sometimes crying works, ladies. A lot of times it doesn't. Okay. But the safest thing is just not to speed. Now, I don't know. I'm not advocating here. Just let me throw this at you. I'm a defensive driver. Okay. So this is my thoughts. If I'm driving faster than everybody else,
Get out of the way.
I only have to worry about what's in front of me. I don't have to worry about what's behind me. So I can focus on that, because nobody's coming by me.
That's how I am.
No, I'm serious. I mean, if I'm driving to Kansas City or something, I might get passed by 1 car. Some crazy person doing 90. But, if it's 75, I'm at least doing 85. And dude, when I drove to Seattle and back this summer, it's 80 miles an hour. The speed limit is in northern Utah, Wyoming, and Oregon. No, not in Oregon. And Montana. 80 miles an hour. Now, the thing that's dangerous about that is not the driving fast. It's the person that's driving slow. Because when you're doing 85 and somebody's doing 55, you come up on them a lot quicker than you realize. You know what I mean? That's where the danger comes in. I tend not to drive 90. I mean, to me, that's just I mean, I could do it, it's just, it's a little, I think, dangerous. So, okay, sorry. So let's talk about this, guys. So because it's illegal and there's still demand, you're gonna get organized crime, the black market, right? So you guys heard about Al Capone?
Yep.
Chicago? There's a really good movie called The Untouchables. Okay, it's got really good cast of characters in it. De Niro's plays Capone. You got Andy Garcia, who's a cop. You got Kevin Costner, who's Elliot Ness, and then the famous 007 guy, Sean Connery. He's awesome, dude. Love Sean Connery. Okay. Great movie, very bloody. But it teaches you a lot about Capone. And so Elliot Ness was actually a Treasury Department official that got Capone on tax evasion charges, not murder. I mean, he was responsible for the deaths of dozens of people. Okay, Capone was. But they got him on tax evasion. Okay, and got him in prison. In cities like Kansas City, New York City, you had turf. So the Italians had one part of the city. The Poles, they had another part of the city. The Jews controlled this part of the city. The Irish, this part of the city. And if you tried to sell liquor on their turf, you couldn't call the Federal Trade Commission and say, this guy's competing unfairly. Yeah, you take it in your own hands. Okay, and that's where the violence comes in. And Chicago was the worst. I mean, Capone, that was bad. I mean, a lot of innocent people died in the crossfire. Okay, so, this just, it turned out to be a bad deal. Now, guys, there's some good byproducts of this in the end. Like moonshine. Moonshine is nasty, okay? I've had grape flavored moonshine that's okay, but anyhow. So in the South, did you guys ever hear the TV show The Dukes of Hazzard?
Yeah.
I think they did a movie too. So these rednecks, they would run liquor. So they would somebody would make it out on the farm, right? And then they would transport it, and the cops would chase them. So they souped up their engines, right, to run from the cops. And when Prohibition was over, you had all these rednecks with fast cars and nothing to do. They built dirt tracks, started racing. And $1 billion industry called NASCAR is born. Yeah, I mean, that's where NASCAR originated from. There's some really good old movies on this, like it's called Grease Lightning or White Lightning or something like that. Richard Pryor. You know Richard Pryor?
That's the
Comedian?
Wait, I thought he was.
Yeah, he burned his hair. Yeah. He's a black comedian. Oh, he's freaking funny. He's from the 70s and 80s. I mean, you can YouTube his stuff. He's funny.
Wait, who's that NASCAR driver that's like?
Oh, Bubba?
Huh?
Bubba Wallace?
No. Oh, no. Yeah.
Oh, Ricky Bobby?
No. He's like the father of NASCAR. He drives the blue
Dale
car.
Earnhardt?
No.
Oh, you're going way. Richard Petty.
Yeah.
Yeah, Richard Petty. Yeah, 42.
Yeah.
Number 42. Yeah, STP. Yeah, he's a legend.
He drives Dodge, and I like Dodge, and I work at a dealership.
I like a Dodge myself. All right. So anyhow, you ever been to anybody NASCAR fans? Oh, really? Oh yeah, because you guys know Boyer, right? Yeah. So we got a Kansas. Well, he retired. Yeah. So who's your favorite driver?
Well, he retired. Dale Earnhardt.
Oh yeah. He retired too. Probably owns a team or something.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I get most of my stuff from my dad, because my dad liked it, so
Yeah.
I kind of really like it. But now since he's not racing anymore, I just, whatever dad likes, I like.
Yeah. I like the first 5 laps and the last 5 laps. Yeah, but I can't. I've been to Talladega. Have you been to Kansas City? Did you go to Kansas City Speedway?
Yeah.
Did you go to Daytona too?
No.
They never took you? Your mom and dad. Jeez. I know your mom and dad have been to Daytona, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of, it's a whole cultural thing. But can I tell you a story? About NASCAR and a good friend of mine. When I was in high school, I'll try and keep the camera on. I had a friend named Van, okay? Van was adopted, and he was like, of all my friends, he was the guy that liked NASCAR the most, okay? And I grew up in the South. And so one night when we're like 22, we're all hanging out, a bunch of friends, and actually there's like 5 of us, 2 girls and 3 guys. We're just hanging out. And it's like 11 o'clock at night. Talladega's the next day. Talladega's in Alabama. Okay, we're in Florida, North Florida. Like, why don't we just go to the race tomorrow? So we leave like at 11:30 at night, drive overnight to Talladega, pull into the infield, which is in the middle of the track, because you could drive in there, and slept for a couple of hours and got up, and the race festivities began. Okay, that's my only NASCAR race, and it was fun. But Van, who I went with on that, when he turned about 20, he started looking for his birth mom. Okay, and he was able to track her down. And this guy, who's a huge NASCAR fan, finds out that his mother, who gave him up, she had him when he was really young, gave him up for adoption, and she was glad he found her. You know what I mean? She had married this guy named French. His last name's French. Do you know who that is? Okay. He's the founder of NASCAR. The founder of NASCAR. So she lived in Daytona. They did the Daytona 500. Okay. And her husband, his mom's husband, is the founder of NASCAR. And his stepbrother, who his mom had another child after she married this guy, he races. So Van lives in Pensacola, which is like 4 hours away from Daytona. Moves to Daytona and be with his new family. He is a geologist and a huge race fan. Drives a Porsche. It's pretty sweet. I got to drive it a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Isn't there a smaller racing
Circuit?
Yeah. I know my uncle.
Yeah, so I mean, like a lot of times, like on Saturdays you have like the undercard, and then on Sundays you've got the big race. Yeah, so they do that. There's different circuits. There's tracks all over the country, smaller tracks. Like we have 81 Speedway here, which is a dirt track. When I lived in Florida, we had it was a 1/4 mile paved track, and they had snowball derby there every year, and it was fun. It's really loud. And I've been to the Indy 500, which is IndyCar racing, which is crazy. That was 1976. I mean, it's like 400,000 people at an event. I mean, it's crazy how many people. Oh man. Sorry. Hey, but we got good stories, right? All right, I gotta go sub.